My grandma, Margaret, was the definition of everything you'd expect a sweet old lady to be. She had soft white hair that she tied back in a bun, glasses that always slid down her nose, and an endless supply of cookies cooling on her kitchen counter. Her little house in Ohio smelled like cinnamon and old books, and for as long as I could remember, it was my safe place. Whenever I was upset, whether it was about a fight with my mom or getting picked last in gym class, I'd run down the block to her house. She would greet me at the door with that warm, knowing smile and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. Nothing can't be fixed with cookies and stories, she used to say, and I believed her. My grandma's stories were always so vivid. She'd tell me about growing up during the 1940s, about dances at the town hall, about ration lines, and how she'd sneak extra sugar for baking. She painted her childhood as hard but magical, filled with resilience and hope. And I believed every single word. She was the kind of grandma people dreamed of. She never raised her voice, never criticized me like my mom sometimes did, and never seemed to hold grudges. She was gentle, comforting, and wise. At least, that's what I thought. The night everything changed was strangely ordinary. I was 17 when she passed away, right at the start of my senior year of high school. My mom had been caring for her during the last few months, but no one expected her to go so suddenly. It was just a quiet Tuesday evening. One moment she was resting in her chair, her knitting needles moving steadily, and the next, she was gone. Her funeral was small but emotional. Everyone from the neighborhood came, people she'd babysat decades ago, old church friends, even my teachers who had tasted her cookies during bake sales. Everyone talked about how kind and loving she was, how she never had a bad word to say about anyone. I wanted to cry, but something inside me stayed numb. I sat there listening to people tell the same stories about her over and over, and a part of me felt off. It wasn't grief exactly, it was this gnawing feeling I couldn't explain. After the service, my mom, uncle, and I started the painful task of going through her house. My mom wanted everything sorted quickly, like ripping off a bandage. She said she couldn't handle the constant reminders. We started in the living room, carefully boxing up her delicate teacups and shelves of photo albums. Every photo told the same story: Grandma smiling at Christmas, holding us as babies, attending church picnics. A life that seemed simple, almost ordinary. But then, as we moved toward the attic, I felt that strange feeling growing stronger. The attic had always been off limits. Whenever I asked about it as a kid, she would wave me off with a gentle laugh. Just old junk, sweetheart. Nothing worth climbing up there for. But standing there now, with the ladder pulled down and the dusty air swirling around us, I couldn't shake the urge to go up. My mom was busy sorting boxes downstairs, so I climbed the creaky ladder alone. The attic was cramped and dim, with one small window letting in a thin shaft of light. Dust coated everything: old trunks, faded suitcases, yellowing newspapers. It looked like no one had been up there in years. But tucked in the far corner, under a quilt I remembered from childhood, was a small wooden chest. It didn't look like much, just an old box with brass hinges. But something about it drew me in. My hands trembled as I brushed the dust away and slowly opened the lid. Inside, tied neatly with ribbon, were stacks of letters. Hundreds of them. Some envelopes were worn thin from being handled, others still crisp as if untouched. They were addressed to my grandma, but not always under the name I knew. Some were marked Margaret, but others had names I didn't recognize. Maggie Hayes. Margaret Wilson. M. Carter. Confused, I picked up the first letter on top. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the words jumped off the page at me. My dearest Maggie, I think of you every day we're apart. I know people wouldn't understand us, but what we share feels more real than anything I've ever known. One day, maybe the world will let us live openly. Until then, know you are my heart. I froze. My grandma had a secret love? Someone the world wouldn't understand? Shaking, I pulled out another letter. This one was newer, written in neat cursive. M. Carter, I need you to know that I kept our promise. No one ever found out about us. But sometimes, when I look at my family, I wonder if I made the right choice. Please forgive me. My heart pounded in my chest. These weren't just friendly letters. They were love letters. And not from my grandpa, who had died when my mom was a little girl. These were from someone else. Someone my grandma had kept hidden her entire life. I sat there in the dust, my mind spinning. The sweet old lady who baked cookies and told me bedtime stories had lived a whole other life I never knew about. I should have stopped there, but I couldn't. I needed to know more. Who wrote these letters? Why had she hidden them? And what kind of double life had my grandma really been living? The girl who always thought she knew her grandma was about to uncover a truth that would shake her entire family and destroy this simple image of who Margaret really was. I sat cross-legged on the dusty attic floor, the small wooden chest open in front of me like some forbidden treasure. My hands shook as I pulled out letter after letter, each one whispering secrets my grandma had kept locked away for decades. The first few letters were dated in the early 1960s, long after my mom was born. They weren't from my grandpa. His name was Thomas, and he had passed away before I was even born. But these letters were signed with names that made no sense to me. All my love, E, or sometimes just a single initial, like yours forever, C. Every word seemed drenched in longing. Maggie, when I saw you today at the diner, pretending we were just friends, my heart broke. I want to shout to the whole world that you're mine. But I know we can't. Not here. Not now. One day, maybe. I stopped reading and pressed my hand against my chest, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. I couldn't believe what I was holding. My sweet, cookie-baking grandma had been in love with someone she couldn't be with. Someone she kept a secret so carefully that even her children, even my mom, had no idea. But why? I looked closer at the envelopes. Some had return addresses from towns only an hour away. Others were sent from out of state. The handwriting varied, sometimes delicate and flowery, other times bold and sharp. Whoever these people were, they weren't just one person. That's when I noticed a smaller bundle of letters tied with a different ribbon, deep red, almost like velvet. They seemed newer, the paper less yellowed, the ink darker. My fingers trembled as I untied the ribbon and unfolded the first one. Dearest Margaret, I know we promised to never write again, but I can't live with the silence. I can't live pretending our life together never happened. Do you think your family suspects? Do you think your children will ever know who I really was to you? I stopped breathing. Our life together? I flipped to another letter from the same bundle. Sometimes I think about the little house we shared before everything fell apart. I can still see you standing in the kitchen, laughing as the rain poured outside. That was the only time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere. With you. My skin prickled with goosebumps. A house. They lived together? My grandma had another partner? My brain was spinning so fast I could barely keep up. All these years, I thought I knew everything about her. She had lived in that same small house in Ohio for as long as I'd been alive. She was a widow, a devoted mother and grandmother. But now I was staring at proof that she had shared a whole other life, another home, another love, that none of us had ever known about. I needed answers. I gathered up as many letters as I could carry and shoved them into my backpack. I climbed down the ladder quietly, my heart hammering. My mom was in the kitchen downstairs, sorting through silverware. She didn't notice me slip past. When I got home that night, I spread the letters out on my bed like puzzle pieces. I tried to arrange them in order by date, hoping a timeline would help. But the more I read, the more confusing it got. One letter hinted at someone named Evelyn. Another mentioned a man named Charles. Some were signed with just C. Some referenced secret meetings in motels. Others talked about holidays spent apart. It wasn't just one double life. It was like she had multiple. Different people, different loves, all carefully hidden. I couldn't stop imagining her, decades younger, sneaking around in the shadows, pretending to be the perfect housewife while her heart belonged elsewhere. What had driven her to it? Loneliness? Passion? Was my grandpa not enough? Or was she simply someone none of us ever really knew? The more I read, the more I felt like my childhood memories were unraveling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her smile, her voice, the way she always said, family is everything. But what if, for her, family wasn't everything? What if she'd been living two lives the whole time, one for the world to see and one for herself? I wanted to ask my mom, but how could I? What would I even say? Hey mom, did you know grandma might have had a secret life with someone named Evelyn? Or Charles? No, I couldn't. Not yet. So instead, I went back. The next afternoon, I told my mom I was going to study at the library. Instead, I climbed back up into the attic. My hands felt steadier this time as I dug through the chest. That's when I found it. A small, leather-bound journal wedged beneath the stack of letters. Its cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, but inside was my grandma's handwriting. March 12, 1965. Today, I met her again. I told myself I wouldn't, but when she smiled at me, I felt like I was 17 all over again. I know this is dangerous. I know if Tom ever found out, it would destroy everything. But how can I deny myself love when my heart beats this way? I read that entry 3 times before I let it sink in. Her. Evelyn wasn't just a friend. Evelyn was the love my grandma couldn't admit to. My chest ached. Suddenly, all those little moments I'd overlooked started making sense. How grandma always avoided certain topics. How she sometimes stared out the window with a sadness I couldn't explain. How she once told me in a rare serious tone, "The world isn't always kind to people who love differently, sweetheart." But that doesn't make their love any less real. At the time, I thought she was just speaking in general. But now I realized she was talking about herself. My grandma had been in love with another woman. The truth hit me so hard I had to sit down on the attic floor to catch my breath. She had lived her whole life hiding who she really was. She had smiled and baked cookies, gone to church, raised kids, and played the role everyone expected. But deep down, she had carried this secret love, this other life, until the day she died. And now I was the only one who knew. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on me. Should I tell my mom? Should I share this with anyone? Or would exposing her secret destroy the image of the woman everyone thought they knew? All I knew was that my grandma wasn't who she seemed. She was more complicated, more human, and maybe more broken than I ever realized. And the more I uncovered, the more desperate I became to understand everything she had been hiding from us all. But I had no idea that the deeper I dug, the more devastating the truth would become, and that these letters were only the beginning of the storm that was about to hit my family. I carried the weight of those letters like a secret fire inside me. Every time I looked at my mom, I felt like I was betraying her by not telling her what I'd found. But how could I? She was already struggling. Sorting through my grandma's belongings had left her exhausted and snappy. I didn't want to pile more grief onto her shoulders. Still, the words in those letters echoed in my head. One day, maybe the world will let us live openly. Until then, know you are my heart. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. The truth was clawing at me, begging to be spoken out loud. One evening, as my mom and I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by boxes of grandma's things, I finally blurted it out. "Mom, did you ever know if grandma loved someone else?" She froze, her hand stilling over a stack of greeting cards. "What are you talking about?" I swallowed hard. I found letters in the attic. They weren't from grandpa. They were from other people. People she loved. People she lived with, maybe. My mom's face went pale. "What letters?" I hesitated, then pulled a few from my backpack. I slid them across the table, my hands trembling. My mom picked them up with narrowed eyes and began to read. At first, her expression was blank, but as she flipped through each one, her jaw tightened. Her breathing quickened. Finally, she slammed the letters down on the table. "No. No. This isn't real. This is some kind of mistake. Mom, I whispered. It's her handwriting. And the journal. She loves someone named Evelyn. And someone else, maybe Charles. She wasn't who we thought she was. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the soft kind of tears you shed when you're sad. They were hot, angry tears. Stop it. Don't you dare talk about her like that. Your grandmother was a good woman. She was faithful to your grandfather. She was everything a mother should be. I wanted to reach across the table and comfort her, but she looked like she would shatter if I touched her. Mom, I'm not saying she wasn't good, but she was more complicated than we knew. She had this whole other side of her life. Enough. My mom's voice cracked like a whip. She shoved the letters back at me. Whatever you think you found, it doesn't matter. She's gone. And she doesn't deserve to have her memory dragged through the mud. I stared at her, stunned. I thought she'd be curious, maybe even relieved to finally know the truth. But instead, she was furious. The silence between us stretched heavy and suffocating. Finally, she stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You keep those letters to yourself, do you hear me? Don't you dare tell your uncle or anyone else. I won't let you ruin her memory. Her words cut deep, sharper than I expected. I nodded weakly, but inside, I was burning. Because I couldn't just ignore it. The next day, I went to school but couldn't focus on anything. Math equations blurred. History lessons felt meaningless. All I could think about was Grandma, her smile, her cookies, her stories, and how all of it had been just one part of who she was. After school, I went back to her house alone. My mom thought I was at a friend's place. The attic smelled the same, dusty, heavy, secretive. I sat cross-legged on the floor again and dug deeper into the chest. That's when I found another stack of letters, different from the rest. These weren't tied with ribbons. They were loose, scattered, like someone had hidden them quickly. The first one I picked up made my stomach drop. Margaret, if anyone finds out about us, it will ruin you. Do you understand? You'll lose everything. Your children, your church, your friends. They'll never forgive you. Please, please be careful. Another letter, from years later, said, I wish we didn't have to live in the shadows. I hate sneaking around. But I'll never stop loving you, even if the world says I shouldn't. I clutched the papers so tightly they crumpled. My grandma hadn't just been hiding this out of guilt. She'd been hiding it out of fear. Fear of losing everything. Suddenly, the image of her life made so much more sense. The way she kept her past locked away. The sadness that sometimes slipped through her smile. The way she always told me, be true to yourself, even if it's hard. She hadn't been giving me advice. She'd been giving me a confession. But my mom didn't want to hear it. She wanted to keep Grandma's memory wrapped in a neat little bow. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called my best friend, Jenna, and begged her to come over. We sat on my bedroom floor as I spread the letters out in front of her. She read silently for a long time, her eyes wide. Finally, she whispered, Holy crap. Your grandma was in love with a woman? I nodded. And maybe a man too. I don't know. It's all so confusing. But she lived this whole secret life no one knew about. Jenna leaned back, processing. That's actually kind of amazing. I mean, not the hiding part, but the fact that she had this whole story. Like, she wasn't just someone's grandma. She was her own person. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Her own person. That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about. My grandma had spent her whole life being everything to everyone else, a mother, a grandmother, a church member, a neighbor. But deep down, she had been someone else entirely. Someone no one was allowed to see. The thought made me both proud of her and heartbroken for her. But when I told Jenna that my mom didn't want me to say anything, she frowned. You can't keep this a secret. What if this is the truth she wanted someone to find? What if she wanted you to know? Her words planted a seed in my mind that wouldn't go away. What if Grandma had left the letters on purpose? What if she knew I'd be the one to climb into the attic and open that chest? What if she wanted me to finally tell her story? But if I did, I risked tearing my family apart. The next Sunday, at church, I sat with my mom and uncle while everyone praised Grandma's memory. She was such a faithful wife, the pastor said. A shining example of loyalty and devotion. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The words rang false, not because Grandma hadn't been loyal in her own way, but because no one knew the truth about who she really was. By the end of the service, I knew I had a choice. I could stay silent, protect her secret, and let the world remember her as the perfect grandmother she pretended to be. Or I could speak up, tell the truth, and risk destroying the family's carefully built image of her. But I was only 17. And carrying the weight of her double life alone was already breaking me apart inside. The choice was coming for me, whether I wanted it or not. And when it did, the fallout would change everything. Secrets have a way of clawing their way into the light, even when you try to bury them. I thought I could hold onto my grandma's truth, keep it hidden in my backpack with the letters and journal pages, but it started bleeding into everything. Into the way I spoke, the way I looked at my mom, the way I sat through church sermons about loyalty and the sanctity of marriage. I felt like I was walking around with a storm inside me, and eventually, that storm broke. It happened one night at dinner. My uncle had come over, and the two of them, he and my mom, were reminiscing about Grandma, laughing about how she used to sneak extra cookies into our school lunches or how she always knitted lopsided scarves. For a moment, everything felt warm and nostalgic. But then my uncle said something that cracked me wide open. She was the most faithful woman I ever knew. Even after Dad died, she never looked at another man. That's what I respected about her. I dropped my fork with a clang. My mom glanced at me sharply. What's wrong? I couldn't hold it in anymore. That's not true, I blurted. Both of them stared at me. My uncle raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, not true? She wasn't just some perfect, faithful widow. She had a life you don't know about. She wasn't who you think she was. My mom's face hardened instantly. Stop. But I couldn't. My voice shook, but I pushed forward. I found letters in the attic. She loved other people, people none of us knew about. She wasn't just Grandma the widow. She had a whole other side. The silence that followed was deafening. My uncle leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What are you talking about? She loved a woman, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Evelyn. And maybe a man named Charles. There were letters, journals. She lived another life, in secret. She wasn't just what you think. My uncle's face flushed red. That's nonsense. You must have misunderstood. I didn't, I snapped, louder than I meant to. I read it with my own eyes. She was in love. She was hiding it because she was scared of what people would think. But it was real. My mom slammed her fist on the table so hard the glasses rattled. Enough. Do you hear me? Enough. Tears stung my eyes. Why are you so afraid to admit the truth? Why can't you just accept that she wasn't perfect, that she was complicated? Because she's gone. My mom shouted, her voice breaking. She can't defend herself. She can't explain. And I won't let you destroy her memory with the truth? I interrupted bitterly. The air in the room felt suffocating. My uncle muttered something under his breath, pushed his chair back, and stormed out. The slam of the front door made me flinch. My mom just sat there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she looked small, fragile, like she couldn't carry the weight anymore. Finally, she whispered, You don't understand. You're too young. You don't know what it was like back then. I wiped my cheeks. Then tell me. Explain it to me. Because all I know is, Grandma spent her whole life hiding who she was, and now you want to bury her all over again. Her shoulders sagged. She didn't answer. She just stood up and went upstairs, leaving me alone at the table, surrounded by the pieces of a family cracking apart. The next day at school, I couldn't concentrate. I sat in class, staring at my notebook, replaying the argument over and over. Part of me felt guilty, like I'd broken some sacred rule by speaking up. But another part of me felt relief. At least the truth wasn't only inside me anymore. After school, I found myself walking to the library, not even fully aware of my feet moving. Something inside me told me to dig deeper. Maybe I could find records, old addresses, property deeds, anything that might confirm what the letters hinted at. I spent hours scrolling through old archives on the library's computer. And then, finally, I found it. A deed from 1968. A small house on the edge of town, owned jointly by Margaret Wilson and Evelyn Hayes. My breath caught. It was real. They had lived together. I printed the record and folded it carefully into my backpack. Proof. Undeniable proof. When I got home, I pulled the letters back out and reread them with fresh eyes. The way they talked about their little house. The rainstorms. The laughter in the kitchen. It wasn't just words on paper, it was their life. A life my grandma had been forced to erase. And now I held the only pieces of it left. But I couldn't tell my mom again. Not yet. Not when she was still drowning in denial. So instead, I confided in Jenna again. We sat in the diner across from the school, sipping milkshakes, the letters spread out between us. "This is huge," she whispered. "Do you realize what you're holding? This isn't just your family's secret. This is history. Proof of how hard it was back then. Proof that love existed, even when it wasn't allowed." I nodded slowly. I don't know what to do with it. Part of me wants to tell everyone, like stand on a rooftop and scream it out. But part of me knows my family would never forgive me. Jenna leaned forward. "What if your grandma wanted to be remembered for who she really was, not just who people thought she was? What if you're the one who's supposed to tell her story?" Her words sank deep into me, planting a seed I couldn't shake. Maybe Jenna was right. Maybe Grandma had left those letters in the attic on purpose. Maybe she had wanted me to find them, to finally tell the truth she never could. But if I did, it would shatter everything. The family. The community. The perfect image of Grandma Margaret, the sweet church lady. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. On my desk, the letters sat in a neat pile. But to me, they felt like dynamite, just waiting for me to light the match. And deep down, I knew, sooner or later, I would. The letters haunted me for weeks. I carried them everywhere, zipped into the hidden pocket of my backpack like contraband. Every time I opened the chest in my room to peek at them, I felt like they were burning holes through the paper, demanding to be seen. But the more I tried to bury them, the heavier they became. I was slipping in school, zoning out during lectures, scribbling Evelyn's name in the margins of my notebooks like it belonged to me. At night, I dreamed of a house I'd never seen, the one from the letters, where Grandma and Evelyn laughed together, where they could finally be themselves. I started to wonder if silence was the real betrayal. The breaking point came during a family gathering. My uncle had organized a dinner to celebrate Grandma's memory. It was supposed to be healing, but the whole night felt like a performance. They told the same sanitized stories, passed around old photos, and spoke about her as if she were a saint carved from marble. "She was the most devoted, selfless woman I ever knew," my uncle said proudly, raising his glass. I stared down at my plate, my hands trembling under the table. Selfless. Devoted. Perfect. Those words weren't wrong, but they weren't the whole story either. And suddenly, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. That's not all she was. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. "What are you talking about?" my uncle asked, his voice sharp. My mom's face went pale. "Don't." But I couldn't stop. My throat burned, and the words poured out. Grandma wasn't just the sweet widow you think she was. She had a whole other life. a life none of you knew about. She loved someone else. A woman. Evelyn. Gasps echoed around the table. My uncle pushed his chair back violently. That's a lie. It's not. I pulled the folded deed from my pocket and slapped it on the table. I found this. A house she owned with Evelyn. And letters. Hundreds of them. They loved each other for years. She lived in fear, hiding it from all of us, because she thought you wouldn't understand. And look at you, you still don't. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. You all worship this perfect version of her, but that wasn't who she really was. She was human. She was brave. She lived a double life because she had no choice. And you deserve to know. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom's hands trembled as she covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. My uncle shook his head, red with fury. How dare you, he hissed. How dare you tarnish her memory with this filth? It's not filth, I shouted back, my whole body shaking. It was love. The kind she couldn't share. The kind you're too blind to see. My uncle stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the wall. For a long moment, it was just me and my mom, sitting in the wreckage. She stared at the deed on the table, her shoulders quivering. Finally, in a broken whisper, she said, I always wondered why she seemed so sad sometimes. Why she'd go quiet, like she was remembering something she couldn't tell me. I thought it was about Dad. But maybe. Her voice cracked. Maybe it was her. The tears came hot and fast down my own face. She didn't trust anyone to know. Not even you. But she trusted me enough to find the truth. We sat there crying, the silence between us no longer cold, but heavy with something new, understanding. The days after were messy. My uncle refused to speak to me, calling me a liar, saying I was brainwashed by the world. But my mom, she changed. Slowly, painfully, she began to accept it. She asked to see the letters, and I let her. She read them one by one, tears falling onto the pages. Sometimes she smiled softly, almost wistfully, at the words of love her mother had hidden for so long. This doesn't make me love her less, my mom whispered one night as she closed the final letter. It just makes me realize how strong she really was. She carried this her whole life. And she still gave us everything she had left. Hearing her say that felt like breathing after drowning. A month later, I stood in the attic again, the chest open in front of me. But this time, I wasn't hiding. My mom was beside me. We packed the letters carefully into boxes, not to bury them, but to preserve them. To keep her story safe. She deserves to be remembered as she really was, I said softly. My mom nodded, brushing away tears. Not just the grandmother who baked cookies. Not just the widow. But the woman who loved fiercely, even when the world told her she couldn't. The following spring, I gave a speech at school. It was part of a history project, but I didn't just share dates and events. I shared my grandma's story, the hidden life, the letters, the love she wasn't allowed to show. I didn't use her name, but I saw people's faces soften as I read her words aloud. Some kids cried. Some teachers nodded, eyes glassy. For the first time, I felt like she was being seen. Like she was finally free. Looking back, I realized my grandma wasn't two different people, the sweet lady with cookies and the secret woman in love. She was both. She was whole. She taught me that people are more complicated than they seem. That love doesn't always fit into neat boxes. That hiding yourself can break you, but sometimes you have no choice. And most of all, she taught me that telling the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to keep love alive. Because my grandma's story didn't end with her death. It lives on in me. In the letters I keep safe. In the truth I carry forward. And even though she spent her life in the shadows, I'll spend mine making sure her love finally sees the light.